time to take back control of our society. Today's world requires an open and honest discussion about the current events. On the Smoking Glass Hour with Baron Glass, our goal is to engage people from different walks of life into a healthy discussion, creating a positive outcome. When it comes to global events, tune in to the Smoking Glass Hour with Baron Glass on Monday nights at 7:30. We don't just listen to the news, we bring you the news.
We can be most effective when we are engaged in the political process, and there's no time like the present. One of our main goals is effective advocacy through active participation from you. Those who stand for nothing will fall for anything. Our efforts to keep you engaged and informed as to the importance of current events happening locally and abroad started 2 years ago. Our number one goal is to make a difference. We need you. Join us at the Smoking Glass Hour with Baron Glass.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Smoking Glass Hour with Baron Glass. We are honored to have you as a guest tonight and want to thank each of you for your faithful support. Without further delay, allow me to introduce to you Mr. Baron Glass. Mr. Glass, take it away.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Smoking Glass Hour with Baron Glass on tonight. Tonight's show will feature a lot of things that are going on in society today. Being poor, black, and American. The impact of political, economic, and cultural forces. Out of that subject, we choose the title, The Ravages of Poverty, the Human Toll. Now you can always tune in at www.thesmokingglasshour.com, or you can simply call in live and listen to us at 773-897-6398. Tonight's special guest will be Miss Nikki Bedrick, Mr. Dave Lamont, if he's able to make it, Miss Vanessa Ghazi, Mr. Corey Jackson, and Mr. Aaron Hopkins. With candidates running for office, who would best be the one to choose for the issues that are going on now in America? Because, see, we know that poverty has been in existence for a very long time. We know that a lot of people are going up and down and all around. I just got a message from Aaron that he's out working the St. Patrick's Day event, so he'll be listening. So shout out to Mr. Aaron Hopkins that's out there. I know once we get off into this subject, you are going to want to call in and talk about what's going on. Now, we know that in 2005, Hurricane Katrina exposed concentrated poverty in New Orleans. When the television cameras focused on the flooding, the people that were trapped in houses and apartments, and the vast devastation, many Americans were shocked to see the living conditions of the poor. Now, of course, the devastation of Katrina was broadly visited upon the residents of New Orleans, black and white, rich and poor, property owners, public housing tenants, and the likes. But while many residents were able to flee, the very poor, lacking automobiles or money for transportation and lodging, stayed to wait out the storm with tragic results. And through Katrina itself, the nation's attention became riveted on these poor urban neighborhoods. If television cameras had focused on the urban poor in New Orleans or in any inner city ghetto before Katrina, it is believed that the initial reaction to descriptions of poverty and poverty concentration would have been unsympathetic. Public opinion polls in the United States routinely reflect the notion that people are poor and jobless simply because of their own shortcoming or inadequacy, which we know that is a flat-out lie. In other words, few people would have reflected on how the larger forces in society, including but not limited to segregation, discrimination, a lack of economic opportunity, and failing public schools adversely affect the inner city clearly. However, because Katrina was clearly a natural disaster that was beyond the control of inner city poor, Americans were much more sympathetic. Now, we also know that despite the lack of national public awareness of the problems of the urban poor prior to Katrina, social scientists have rightly devoted considerable attention to dysfunctional schools and the likes. They have also devoted their attention to concentrated poverty because of its magnifies the problem associated with poverty in general. Joblessness, crime, delinquency, drug trafficking, broken families, and the likes. Neighborhoods of highly concentrated poverty are seen to many as dangerous, and therefore they become isolated socially and economically as people go out of their way to avoid them. Tonight, we're going to try to break down some of the myths and dispel a lot of the rumors that exist when it comes to poverty itself. Poverty is not just about a person living in a place where they can't find food. Poverty has many elements that are associated with this. So tonight, I know Vanessa's out there and I know Nick is out there. Good afternoon, Nick and Vanessa. How are you doing?
I'm fine. Hi, Vanessa. Hi, Nikki.
Okay, let's get down to the matter. Tonight's title is The Ravages of Poverty, the Human Toll. And Nikki, I believe it was you who basically threw this out, and you wanted to talk about it from an in-depth approach as to how it actually affects the human family. And you also wanted to talk about how it affects those in the poor communities, predominantly individuals of color. So we brought Vanessa in to give some hardcore facts from individuals that have either dealt with this directly or know somebody who have specifically dealt with this, because Vanessa hails from Flint, Michigan, Detroit, or the state of Michigan. So Vanessa, let's get directly into this. When we talk about poverty itself, how do you view poverty, and what do you look at, or how do you look at poverty with regards to how America has treated it from then up until 2016?
Well, the way I look at poverty is that it's man-made. Poverty is something that really does not have to exist. It really doesn't. Because if you go back, we know our history, going back to slavery and all of that, but if you go back just to 1934, back to the National Housing Act of 1934 when they created redlining. So everybody knows what redlining is. Mm-hmm. And that's blacks were denied the key services of like home loans and insurance and the increasing cost of residence to be defined into a geographical area. So when that started happening, when blacks were able to move into what they call white homes or white neighborhoods, white people panicked during that time. They didn't want to, it wasn't that black people were poor. They were able to move into those neighborhoods at some point. And then you had what they call white flight, when the white people went to the suburbs because they didn't want to live next door to a black person or whatever. And with the Housing Act, and then you had FHA in 1968, when they started discriminating against blacks about not giving them loans and stuff like that. So when the white people moved out and moved to the suburbs, these black people had bought homes. So they had mortgages that they had to take care of. They had kids that they had to take care of. I was raised in the 50s and the 60s. So my parents, I heard redlining back in the 70s when my sister, she owns a real estate company. And I heard her talking about redlining back in the 70s. So it was something that's been going on for a long, long, long time. And it's a way of keeping black people oppressed and keeping them corralled in a certain neighborhood so that, they do make enough money to move to what used to be a white neighborhood. But then the white people, they move out, they actually had an insurance during that time when my sisters, I heard them discussing it before. They had an insurance that if what they call an undesirable, a black person or another person moved into your neighborhood, they had insurance for that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's against the law. Now I'm talking from Michigan, and it came. They said it was against the law now for them to do that. But I also heard that they still had that insurance.
Exactly.
I don't know if they're doing it undercover. So when the white people left, guess who else left? Your businesses left.
Mm-hmm.
So you had black people stuck in these neighborhoods with these big mortgages paying on these houses. But if your job left, then what were you going to do? That you couldn't move to the suburbs.
Right. Well, Vanessa, we know that redlining exists. I specifically have a background. One of the backgrounds that I have is in real estate. 90 hours. You have to pass the state and the local national test. So here we are. In the United States, we know that redlining is the practice of denying services either directly or through selectively raising prices to residents of certain areas based on the racial or ethnic makeup of those areas. Wow. Some of the most famous examples of redlining regards denying financial services such as banking or insurance. Other services such as health care or even supermarkets can be denied to residents to carry out the most famous things that they need. The term redliner was coined back in the late 60s by John McKnight, a sociologist and a community activist. It refers to the practice of marking a red line on a map that delineates the area where banks would not invest. Later, the term was applied to discrimination against a particular group of people, usually by race or sex, irrespective of geography. Based on that, do you feel, and I know that you do, but I'm going to ask you, redlining is one of the causes as a result of why we are being affected by this now?
Exactly.
Okay.
It's almost like the catalyst of putting people, black people or Hispanics or anybody they consider undesirable, even poor whites, just to herd you into a certain area and to keep you there.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to keep you, the businesses had to leave. It's just like when General Motors left Flint. When General Motors left Flint, the ripple effect got started. People that had businesses, they started losing. I mean, you weren't working for General Motors anymore.
Mm-hmm.
These people had all these houses, and you had kids that were in college, and people were struggling, and some of them moved. Granted, some of them got up and left. And then some of them, they didn't have a choice.
Mm-hmm. So Vanessa,
yeah.
Do you feel that? And I'm gonna jump over to Nick after this because I'm trying to get both perspective as we go. Do you feel that? And I do because I've seen it personally. The district that I represent as an elected official, it includes 1, 2, or 3 different types of public housing that is orchestrated by the government. Do you feel that public housing has had a direct effect on individuals from the poor, poverty line? And do you feel that that was one of the causes as well when public housing was basically taken away from those who were part of the Black Panthers or those who actually was involved in that when they were going out, taking care of the community, providing foods and things like that? Do you feel that that was another component of the causes to poverty itself?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Most definitely.
Okay. Now, Nikki, coming from another angle, I'm going to say, do you feel that redlining has had a direct effect or a direct impact from then up until now that has contributed to the high rate that we actually have when it comes to poverty? Again, we know that Hurricane Katrina itself expose a lot of things that the media knew, mainstream media, once again, they don't target all that. We know that a lot of politicians, they don't do anything because they know all they have to do is go back during election time, promise some things, get the vote, and then they don't come back for the next 4 years. Do you feel that from your eyes and from where you sit and what you've seen, do you feel that redlining has contributed to, and as well as government housing, to the level of poverty?
Oh, absolutely, Myron. I think it's just an extension of what's been going on for 400 years. Yes, I mean, when after decades of segregation, the culture of poverty has become associated with black people. Our inner city residents are normally surrounded by crime, drugs, and homelessness, but they're blamed for it. And redlining created this.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen those maps where the redlining is not only isolating the area, they built highways around them.
Mm-hmm.
Look, they built walls, to ghettoize. So here, really, there's actual physical divisions of those neighborhoods in all cities. And 70% of black people live in urban areas.
Mm-hmm.
That's over 30 million people. And most face that kind of intense spatial isolation, and with the loss of jobs and the movement of the white resident out of the city, public resources go too. There's inadequate economic opportunities. There's inadequate education. And the communities are expected to accomplish stable neighborhoods on their own. It's impossible.
Mm-hmm.
It's impossible.
Right.
It's my belief that so many inner city residents, particularly youth, are suffering. There's this idea of post-traumatic stress disorder. I think when you live surrounded by violence, within and from out, I think the people living in inner cities, I mean, many are suffering from real kind of stress, just about their own personal safety, about all of it.
I believe we probably dropped Nikki, and that's fine. She'll call back in. Vanessa, let me go a little bit deeper. Nikki, you out there still? Okay, we lost her. Yeah, I know Corey Jackson is out there. I'm gonna bring Corey in. Let me ask you this: the emergency of the code of the streets. Okay, we know that the streets can be very, very enticing. Okay, do you feel, Vanessa, that some young men, the draw of the street itself is so powerful that they cannot avail themselves of legitimate employment opportunities when they become available because of the street? I know Nick is back, but I'm going to get you to answer that, Vanessa, then I'll bring Nikki back in.
Yeah, the lure of the street.
Yeah.
For young black men, yeah. It's when you deprive somebody for so long of having, just the basics of the chicken in every pot, the little white picket fence and the little white house, the little stuff that we didn't get.
Mm-hmm.
And when you deprive people of things, and then you stick them in the ghetto and you treat them like rats in a maze, you flood the neighborhood with drugs, and then they know, well, if I sell these drugs, I can do this and I can get this and I can get that. Even though they realize they're not probably going to live to see 30.
Mm-hmm.
It's horrible, but yeah, it is.
Okay, Vanessa, hold on just a second. I don't know which one or who's out there, but there's a little back noise and it's making it a little complicated to hear exactly what it is that you're saying. But I'm going to let Nikki come back in, Vanessa, then I'll come back to you, then I'll go to Corey, because I got a series of questions, because we want to make sure that we focus on the cause and effect and make sure that people understand that some of this is not by fault of anybody else's because they are born. It's because of barriers. It's because of all of those things that exist that prevents a person from being able to do it. And we know that economics is one of. So, Nick, I'm going to let you come back in.
Generational poverty is exactly what the term implies. It passes from generation to generation to generation. I grew up in generational poverty. Was one of the few who managed to get out. So I understand what generational poverty is. And when you are born, okay, we're talking about these kids that are now 14, 15, and that's, these young black men at the lure of the street. These black men have known nothing but the street.
Mm-hmm.
They've grown up in those streets. They've been born in those streets. They've gone to school in those streets. Their mothers and fathers have come from the same place. One of the prerequisites, for trying to bring up a healthy child, and I know you know it, Vanessa, and I know you know, Baron, and I know it, is a safe environment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We teach our children what we know. Our children become what we do. If you're talking about this being passed from generation to generation, who is teaching those children? And it's not a matter of the chicken or the egg.
Mm-hmm.
This is what the children know. So suddenly there's this expectation that these young men who are 14, 15 know anything else. They don't.
Correct.
Don't.
Correct. Yes.
And this is why, I don't know if it was Aaron or Corey that said it in a couple of shows back, there's this expectation, particularly by white America and many, many, many black Americans who've managed to escape those conditions, that these young men are supposed to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. I think it was Aaron or Corey said, what if you have no boots?
Mm-hmm.
What if you have no boots? And I think without outside help, these communities cannot come back from this by pulling themselves up by their bootstraps. This is a condition that was induced, and I believe it's been the condition, historically, and I really looked into that in the last days.
Mm-hmm.
The black family in America has never, ever been free, okay, of assault from without, state-sanctioned violence, state-sanctioned economic discrimination, social violence. The black family has never in its entire history been free of that outside threat.
Wow, Nikki, that is very surprising. Let me bring Corey Jackson in, and we're going to come back to that because freedom is something we know that comes with a price. Now, Corey, let me ask you this, then I'm going to throw it out there to Nikki and Vanessa. We know that many liberal scholars, okay, are reluctant for whatever reason to discuss or research the role that culture plays in the negative outcome found in inner cities. Why? We don't know. Okay, it is possible that they fear being criticized for reinforcing the popular view that negative social outcomes like poverty, unemployment, drug addiction, crime are due to the shortcomings of people themselves, which goes directly back to what Nikki said about this freedom. Corey Jackson, do you feel that liberal scholars, liberal politicians, liberal administrators and the likes are afraid to really address this issue of poverty here in this country? Because there's no way, in my belief, based on what I've seen in other countries or in another country, that this place we call the United States of America should have this alarming percentage of people in poverty, regardless as to where they come from or what state they're hailing from. Corey Jackson.
Absolutely, because what happens when they acknowledge that is the finger points directly back to them.
Mm-hmm.
So when you know that you have a hand in the makeup and how this is all shaped up, you may touch upon it, but you're not going to delve deep, because right below the surface is going to be your name.
Mm-hmm.
Right below the surface, the association is going to go back to you. So to scratch the surface but not go beneath it, because you're going to be associated with it as a cause.
Mm-hmm. So, Corey.
Oh yes, that's exactly why.
When Nikki, I'll let Nikki answer, then I'll go back to Vanessa. Nikki, do you feel that these liberal scholars, politicians, administrators, and the like they are afraid to actually address this issue of poverty and hit it head on. So what I'm equating, just listening to this conversation, and it just came across my mind because it's coming off the cuff, I'm equating poverty to racism.
It is. It is. Environment. So, I live in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. and Maryland. So, I'm right in Washington, D.C. I see inner city poverty every day.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up around inner city poverty. So what I see daily as I travel through Washington, D.C., and what I've grown up with, this is not something that someone told me. This is something that I know.
Right.
That I absolutely know. So when you talk about poverty, you have to hit on a couple different spheres. You have to hit on lack of jobs, lack of resources, and those resources include economic resources, goes back to jobs, social resources, education.
Mm-hmm.
So when you touch on all of those three prongs, it becomes a web of association as to why poverty is.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying?
Right.
So Nikki was saying earlier, you go through, basically what happens is when white people leave, so goes the resources.
Corey Jackson, say that again, Corey. I want to make sure that people understand. Now, this is not an indictment on any one group of people. It is what I call actuality and or reality of what we need to deal with. And we're not finger pointing. What we're doing is we're talking about truths according to what has actually happened, or if somebody have seen this happen with their own individualized. Corey, say that again.
When white people leave, so does the resources.
Mm-hmm.
So you look at any predominantly black inner city neighborhood, and you'll see that the streets are terrible, potholes. You'll see that garbage collection is maybe once a week. I would say that it's not enough that trash is in the street. You'll see that stores are run down. Building owners aren't held any level of accountability to keep a cleanly storefront. And you go to the other side of town, same city, and it's a totally different landscape.
Now, Corey Jackson, hold right there. Let me ask you this now, because we know that there are somebody out there who will listen or go back to the archives and say, here we are, they're blaming the man for this. If it's within our own community, are you blaming somebody else for your own faults? Tell us specifically what you're saying.
I'm speaking the truth.
Okay.
It's the absolute truth. There's no blame to go around, or you're not blaming anyone.
Uh-huh.
You're just speaking the truth. You're just speaking the absolute truth.
Mm-hmm.
You go to so I'll take what's going on in Washington, D.C. right now as we speak, called gentrification. So what's going on in Washington, D.C. right now is there's a shift in the demographics of the population in Washington, D.C. What's happening is businesses are coming into what has always been known as black neighborhood, Southeast D.C. They're coming in and they're taking over well-established businesses. What's happening? The taxes are going up, the rent is going up, or the lease rent is going up. They're making it hard for the traditionally black businesses, storefronts, what have you, that have always been there to survive. So what happens is they end up not being able to afford taxes, not being able to afford the lease rent. So what happens is other businesses come in that can, and all of a sudden there's a change in the demographics of the neighborhood. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, the streets are clean. All of a sudden, houses are being refurbished. All of a sudden, all the black people are being pushed out.
Vanessa.
And it's a whole demographic change.
Vanessa, you heard Corey. You heard what Corey was saying. I don't mean to cut him off. I want to make sure I try to share the time with everybody. You heard what Corey's saying. How do you feel about that? Agree, disagree, add, take away? What's your stance?
No, I absolutely agree. It's called gentrification. That's what they're doing in Flint, and that's what they do it in Houston. When they want their land back, when they the big hospital in Flint, Hurley Hospital, they own a lot of land because there was a street section. It was called Avenue A. When I was a kid in Flint, now I'm 60 years old. When I was a kid in Flint, Avenue A was the ghetto. Mm-hmm. Now, one of your girlfriends, she said, "Oh no, it's not anymore." She said Hurley owned that land and said they moved all those black people out that lived there. They built all these brand new houses, but there's no black people in them. Mm-hmm. They said downtown is changed into that's where the police state is downtown. If something happens in the black neighborhood, they said the police don't even come because they downtown protecting the white people. They trying to turn it into some kind of college town. Mm-hmm. But that's the difference. It's saying if you go a couple of blocks, you're going to see all this beauty. If you go down the street, you're going to see blight. Mm-hmm. And this is what's been going on for years. And it's not just Flint. There's a lot of cities that are doing it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Nikki.
Yeah.
Nikki, you heard you heard Corey and Vanessa. Let's flip it over and get another perspective because tonight we're talking about the ravages of poverty, the human toll. Corey is contending that he's speaking the hardcore truth. It's not an indictment. It's not finger pointing. These are facts according to what he's seen, not just by research, but based on the geographical area where he lives. Give us another point of view as to what Corey and Vanessa has both concurred on.
Oh, I agree completely. Let's look into the kind of history of America, okay? And the first 9 slaves bill of sale was 1615. Now, there may be an indication slaves came in before that. Mm-hmm. African Americans have been on this land, and I'm not disrespecting Native Americans here, it's a whole other issue.
Mm-hmm. Right, correct.
The white settlers brought them. So 1615 in Jamestown is the first bill of sale. So now 1615 to 65 proclamation of emancipation. Mm-hmm. That is 13, 14 generations. Okay, just up until that time. Okay, most Americans on this soil have not been here for 13, 14 generations. Now that's only till 1865. All right. During that time, real mass immigration into America occurred between 1830 and 1915. 30 million people, European, white, came into this country. Okay, when they started that influx, it was still chattel slavery. The black man was still a chattel slave in America. As these immigrants came in, now some may have come in as indentured servants, some may have even been slaves for a minute, but there's a certain point, okay, that those immigrants into this country were assimilated. Maybe take a generation, maybe take 2 generations. They were no longer Poles, they were no longer French, they were no longer German. They were American. Mm-hmm. By virtue of their whiteness, in 2, 3 generations, okay, they assimilated, became part of the American dream. Mm. So you have been on this soil longer. You take, now there's the Proclamation of Emancipation. 12 years later, Jim Crow is enacted. Mm-hmm. There's this little honeymoon period of 12 years. But Baron, I'm a post-war European baby. Mm-hmm. We have stories in every British family of the men, uncles, grandfathers, every available piece of manpower. Britain didn't have a lot of manpower. Mm-hmm. Population went into that war. We all have the stories of the men being killed. After that European war, Europe is ravaged, and people were wandering around, being released from camps or bombed out cities, looking for families that weren't there. During slavery, there was no such thing as the black family. Black family was a tenuous, if if it ever was in existence.
Mm-hmm.
Mothers could be raped. Daughters could be raped. Men were broken. Sold. Children were taken. I think the horrors are unimaginable to the mind of what went on there. And then at the small 12 years, I imagine people were wandering around. Free people were wandering around looking for people just like people were in Europe. And then Jim Crow was enacted, and a viler legal system, and the etiquette around that was incredible. And you bring us to 1965. You know, that is 400 years worth of history when the black family has never been allowed to exist.
So, Nikki, Nikki, let me ask this question while you're on that 400-year landmark. Do you feel that because of the 400 years of existence, so to speak, that even today, from a psychological standpoint, that still affects those who have had to endure all of those things? And based on what you're saying, it seems as if every footnote that you use, it always had a barrier. So it goes back, from what I understand, it never allows people to be free, because you get over this hurdle, something else is thrown at you. When you get over those two hurdles, something else is thrown at you. So it appears that the struggle has continued, and it's going to continue to go on.
Absolutely, Baron. I came across this some research today. This kind of like loose general criteria that how do national kind of characteristics form in a people? Or we take a certain group of people and kind of characteristics of the collective kind of come to the forefront.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to think about in regard to racism, okay? And first of all, and this is 400 years of racism, more because it's as active today. What we teach our children is the first component in these national characteristics. Now, it's just general. The second thing is adult reinforcement of those teachings. The next thing are the patterns of our interpersonal relationship. The fourth thing is cultural sanction, approval for culturally, this is the way we live. And it reinforces those behavioral patterns. The behavioral patterns become fixed and internalized. I'm reading. The behavior patterns become fixed and internalized aspects of our society without any reference to underlying motivations. It's like it's always been this way. And they manifest in the overt behavior of that particular society. That is the DNA of racism.
Mm.
The reason I pointed out other groups coming in, now people may not have liked Poles, people may not have liked the Italians, people may not have liked the Irish. Doesn't matter. There was a point of assimilation. They were white.
Mm.
They were white. And you would be here in droves, 10 million, there were 4 million slaves, there were 4 million people, 4 million black people in America at the emancipation. 3 million got freed.
Mm.
They've never been afforded those rights. And that structural racism is passed from father to son, from father to son, from mother to daughter. And it's insidious, and it's so deeply rooted, and it's state-sanctioned in the sense that the people that are enacting these laws and doing this redlining, they're white.
Vanessa.
So would the Father forgive them, for they know not what they do?
Vanessa, Nikki
It's always been done.
Yeah, Vanessa, Nikki is laying out the groundwork, and I know that she felt that it was always better, or it is better, for people who have experienced the truth, to talk about it. But I've always been one. It does not matter what side of the fence you come from, as long as you understand the opposite side of the fence from whence you came. So Vanessa, you've been an African American female with all of this lack of freedom that Nikki has suggested, all of these barriers that we know exist. Since we're talking about the ravages of poverty, tell us how this has taken a negative toll on the human race or the human people that fall up in this category of poor. I'm going to go to you, then I'll go directly to Corey. So go ahead, Vanessa.
I think the worst thing that is done is actually made people feel hopeless and just made them feel like this is the way it's supposed to be. This is how life is supposed to be. You know, there's nothing we can do about it because blacks don't own anything. You know, we don't own corporations. We don't own airplanes, whatever. We don't own ships. We have no money. We have no resources that we can, you know, call upon and say, okay, we can pull ourselves up because we own this and we can do this and we can do that. So since we don't own anything, if our neighborhoods get flooded with, just like the thing that goes on with the young guys getting guns. Okay, we don't produce guns. We don't know we don't buy guns from anybody, but there's somebody in the neighborhood that can sell guns to our kids, and it's usually, I hate to say it, it's the Arab stores. And I've heard that out of Flint. I don't know how many times these young guys can go to these Arab stores, get a gun, and get whatever they want. A friend of mine said some of them even need dynamite. I said, what are we going to do with this tonight? And this is the kind of stuff that I know that, don't you think the police know it too? Mm-hmm. But nobody's addressing it. Nobody's going and you know, raiding these stores or setting these stores up to get rid of these people that are selling our kids these guns. I mean, kids have, you know, they're kids. They don't have good sense. Sometimes when it's dealing with stuff like that, is once you put a gun in a kid's hand, they feel something. Mm-hmm. Feel invincible almost. So when poverty is just a way of life, and when people think that, you know, we're never going to get out of this, we're never going to have anything, so then that's how they fall into all the other stuff.
Mm-hmm. Corey Jackson.
So I'll sum it all up. What we're talking about here is total black exploitation.
Yeah.
From the first slaves that landed in Jamestown to 2016 today. So if you look over the timeline that Nikki talked about, it's amazing, absolutely amazing, that blacks aren't extinct right now. Mm. If you take everything that has happened, it is amazing that we are even still alive. Because everything that has happened, because everything that has happened to us has been a valid effort to eliminate us.
Mm-hmm. So Corey, you think that, or your thought process is that it's a wonder that we're not extinct?
It's a wonder that we're not extinct.
And that contributes directly to poverty.
And exploitation. So take this for example. The reason why blacks don't have generational wealth compared to white, look at what we were prevented from doing. At one point in time, blacks couldn't own land. Mm-hmm. So if you look at most farming communities, big farms or what have you, those farms have been in those families for generations. Mm-hmm. If you look at generational wealth, Vanderbilt type wealth, these families have been rich since the beginning. So never in the history of the United States have blacks been able to gain a ground to have generational wealth, all the way up to today. So we take today, a low-income black neighborhood once again, black exploitation. What's in every black neighborhood? Liquor stores, liquor stores run by Arab or Asian, corner stores run by Arab or Asians, Chinese takeouts or carryouts run by Asians, dry cleaners, maybe, run by Asians, and a church.
So Corey, you bring me to...
You go into a white community, there aren't any liquor stores. There's a wine store, but there are no liquor stores. There are no Chinese food carryouts. There are no corner stores. They don't allow themselves to be exploited by any other race that's going to come in and set up any type of faulty, what I would call faulty shop. So once again, blacks are being exploited. Our money is always continuously being taken from us. We have to spend outside of our community, and even within our community, we have to spend it with members outside of our community.
So Corey,
the money never stays.
So being exploited adds to the human toll when it comes to poverty.
Absolutely, it goes hand in hand.
Okay, then let me ask you this question. Since you talked about all of the things that you spell out, does that directly go to what Mr. Trump is now themed or has themed as his presidential bid as taking our country back and making our country great again? Because he feels, and many feels, that because we have elected the first African American president, that everything is all fine and good. And since we don't see that as being all fine and good, well, we gave you this, you're not satisfied, now it's time to take it back. Is that some of the code language, or does that contribute to some of this code language? And as a result of that code language, is that a part of what we're talking about tonight?
Okay, so look, let's go here. Poverty knows no race.
Mm-hmm.
White poverty does not get talked about. See, I pride myself for the different avenues that I've walked. I lived in Appalachia, populated heavily by poor whites. I know whites today in Appalachia that don't have running water. I know whites in Appalachia today that still not hunt for sport, but hunt to put food on their table. But see, the media would have it such that they don't report about white poverty. They only report about black poverty.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens, white poverty goes unnoticed, but the propaganda is white. The reason why you are in poverty is because of the blacks that are in poverty taking all of your resources.
Mm.
It's because of them. It's because of the blacks. It's because of the Hispanic. It's because of the immigrants from Mexico and all the other Spanish-speaking countries. White people, you are poor, which we won't talk about, but you are poor because of the blacks, because of the Hispanic. That's what's the propaganda that's put out by the media and the politicians, i.e. Donald Trump. That's why you have all these angry white people that are now showing out at Trump rallies, attacking black protesters. Trump has empowered, and let me say this. It's something I always say. For anyone that may be listening and said, well, Corey's talking about white people, I'm talking about white people that fit in this category. So if you fit, wear it. And I always say, some white people, not all, but listen to this, far too many. Because if you had more white people like Nikki, we would not be having this conversation right now today.
Nikki Bedrick?
I just totally agree with Aaron. I think I think what the Obama presidency did, okay, I think what we're seeing is a backlash as well to, I don't think those still carrying the racist DNA in America could really quite handle a beautiful, intelligent, fabulous black man being their commander-in-chief. I mean, that I think is one component. So I think when you see this ugly, personal, vitriolic attack against, I've said often, attack against the president or Michelle Obama, and it's not about his policies, it's not about this, it's this personal attack. I mean, it's a hate attack. So I think that the most of the backlash that you're seeing today, much of it, is that combined with absolutely what Aaron is saying. I mean, the white, it was a strategy of Reagan, it was a strategy of Nixon, it was a strategy of Clinton to use, black. There's a history. I think I took a look at it today. So Storm Thurmond, do you remember him in the Nixon's time?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was a rampant racist.
Absolutely.
Vocal.
Absolutely.
And Nixon's famous line was that Storm ain't no racist. And then we have Reagan, and you first hear crack babies, and you hear welfare queens, and you hear war on drugs. And then the Clintons, okay, with the crime bill, the Welfare Reform Act, this new dog whistle is super predator, who has to be healed. So the criminalization is if you really Nixon is after civil rights, just after Lyndon Johnson. I think the crackdown started happening right there. You got too much civil rights, quite frankly. You got too much, and it started at that high government level right there, and it's been rolling ever since. And today, these young black men being incarcerated and killed indiscriminately on the streets is the same thing that's been going on since slavery. It's the breaking of the black body. It's the breaking of the black man. It's during Jim Crow. You're free, but you know what? We put a little thing in that 13th Amendment that says I can return you to slavery if you commit a crime. So vagrancy becomes a crime. I deny you a home and then I arrest you for not having one. And it's been going on forever. Today, the black communities are seen. We deny them everything and then blame them. It's never changed, Baron. It's never changed in any era. And you know what? When we need some electoral votes or we need something gone, let's rip off the poor white. Because that perception of the black man as a criminal and the black woman is a welfare recipient. They're taking all of your resources. That card has been used over and over again.
Wow.
I think it's almost standard politics.
Vanessa? I'm speechless right now.
Let's not forget President Johnson, because he had his N-word speech that that was going to keep us voting for them for the next 200 years. But he also made the comment about poor whites. If you give a poor white a common enemy, you make him believe that he's better than the best black man, and how they'll keep voting for him, and they can stay in their pocket, forever. It's like a brainwashing thing that's been going on for centuries. And as far as it's like when my mother back in the '60s, she wanted to open up a business on a predominantly, it was a white street. It was called Detroit Street at the time. She wanted to open up a beauty shop. They wouldn't let her. All of the white business people got together. They went to City Hall. They complained. They had a petition to stop her because their reasoning was she was going to bring an undesirable element into the community.
Lord have mercy.
And she was going to bring the black people in here. So she went to City Hall, and my mother fought City Hall back in the 1960s. I was in elementary school. I'll never forget it because she made it to the front page of the newspaper. She won. My sister still owns that property to this day. And she opened up her beauty shop, on Detroit Street when they renamed it MLK. After that, black on is all black. And even one guy that was petitioning, his name was Harani. He was an Indian guy. He went down there and protested. He had a grocery store. And it's kind of like, I've heard this stuff all my life. You know, I've been called the N-word by little white kids. You know, the kids that I played with that came to my house playing with me every day at school, they called me the N-word. And right after school, you back to my house playing again. You know, that's the kind of life that we had growing up. Mm-hmm. And I used to hear my parents do it, but they never, ever, ever taught us to be against anybody white. They never taught us that. They taught us to defend ourselves, but they never taught us to hate anybody.
Uh-huh.
And that's, you know, most blacks do that. They don't hate anybody. And when, you know, people, you just got to understand, people that have been taught to be racist, that's the same way people are taught to be in poverty. Mm-hmm. So when you can't stop being a racist, sometimes people that are in poverty can't stop being in poverty.
So
if you believe that you can't stop being a racist, and then you get mad at people that are poor, just remember you can't stop being a racist.
So
understand that stop the offense.
Yeah. So Vanessa, Corey, Nikki, let's kind of hone in on what we can look at. We're looking at about 8:58 p.m. Central Standard Time. You're listening to the Smoking Glass Hour with Baron Glass. Tonight's topic is the ravages of poverty, the human toll. We know that for those who are committed to fighting inequality, especially those involved in multiracial coalition politics, the lessons from this discussion tonight, hopefully, will provide key social, political, economic, and cultural forces is to fashion a new agenda that gives more scrutiny to both racial and non-racial policies. Now, given the devastation of what we've talked about tonight, we know that recent recessions and slow jobless recovery, along with especially important things that have existed, monetary and trade policies that may have long-term consequences for our national, regional, and state economies. Now, we know this, that there must be an agenda, and that agenda must be clear and convincing. That agenda should also include every focus on traditional efforts to fight poverty, to ensure that the benefits from any economic upturn are widely shared among the poor, and that they become less vulnerable to downward swings in the economy when it erupts and goes higher. Now, we know that combating racial discrimination in employment is especially devastating during slack labor markets. We know that revitalizing poor urban neighborhoods, including eliminating abandoned buildings like we talked about, Vanessa, and vacant lots to make them more attractive for economic investment that would help improve the quality of life and create jobs in our neighborhood like Corey Jackson talked about. We know that promoting job training programs to enhance employment opportunities for ghetto, quote-unquote, ghetto residents. We know that improving public education to prepare inner city youngsters for higher paying jobs and stable jobs in this new economy will benefit greatly. We know that strengthening what some are 100% against, the unions, to provide the higher wages, worker protection, and benefits typically absent from low-skilled jobs in retail service industries. Now, if we look at these candidates that's running for office, that are running, we look at Donald Trump himself, who is a businessman, so he say. We know that now we have John Kasich. Okay, we have Hillary and we have Bernie. Of those individuals that are running along with Ted Cruz, of those 5 running Nikki Bedrick, who do you feel best benefits this particular conversation when it comes to pulling the lever, and those who would at least be able to address or bring it to the forefront the ravages of poverty, and acknowledge that there is a human toll, and how can we create this conversation and make it more of a national conversation? And we know that mainstream media's number one goal is to distort the message and divide the people. So how can we as progressives make this conversation better than what it is, and who do you feel that would best benefit this particular conversation topic down the road, running for the President of the United States of the 5 that's running? Nikki, I'll throw that to you. I'm not sure if we lost it. Corey Jackson, are you there?
Yes, Byron, I'm here.
Okay, Corey, based on those who are running for office, who do you feel best benefits the leadership role to bring this conversation to the forefront?
Bernie Sanders, to me, has proven that he has capability. He has the core thread of what an individual would be, the first to be able to acknowledge all of this. Everybody else just does not have that quality about them. However, Bernie Sanders does.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I feel he would be the best candidate that would represent everybody,
mm-hmm.
especially those in these poverty-stricken situations.
So Corey, do you feel that those the other remaining 4, because they would have to go up again? Well, let's back up. See, Trump knew up until now that he didn't have to have any support from the Republican Party. But look at him now. He's reaching out to the Senate Majority Leader. He's reaching out to the Speaker of the House. He's reaching out to all of those individual people because he knows now that he has to go back and become a part of the establishment. Now, do you feel that Bernie, and I believe with all of my heart, even if he was a failure, he would at least address these because his track record speaks for itself over the past 30 years. Corey Jackson, do you feel that Bernie can at least bring this? And I know you said it, but we want to make sure that this is the reason why we are pushing whatever candidate that we want out there so people can go out and vote. Bernie Sanders, you feel that he would bring this to the forefront?
He's the only candidate that is true to this cause.
Mm-hmm. Nikki.
With a proven track record.
Nikki, I know you're back now.
Can you hear me, Barron?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Go ahead.
Okay. Albert Einstein has a quote, and he says, "You cannot fix a problem from the same consciousness that created it."
Say that again.
And you cannot fix a problem. You cannot solve a problem by relying on the fix for the same consciousness that created it. So you can't look to the people that created the problem to fix the problem. Real simple. And I mean, Trump, I just, I want to cuss when I think about Trump, so we'll leave him alone. I think Hillary is the establishment. I think she not only created, she furthered and is so much part of the new Jim Crow. Case which I don't know. Bernie Sanders, I could go on a soapbox with Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders' life, forget his political career, just his life has been a commitment to social justice. I don't think there's any political expediency in his policies. I think he may have not known certain things, not been aware, and he's wide open to listen. I think there's a decency and fairness and an honesty in the man. The man, not the politician. Where I think if we could get that kind of shift, that kind of change of direction at the top. Now, I know he'll face incredible problems trying to legislate, just maybe the same as Obama had in the last 8 years. But when we get that shift at the top, the ripple effects down are going to be quite incredible. It's going to change direction, and I think he is the man with the morality, with the honesty, and with the concern and care. I think he honestly cares for people.
Okay, Vanessa, before I bring in, we got Aaron Hopkins out there. He's been listening. He says, Nikki, that he agrees absolutely with what you said, and that would be his comment. But I'm going to allow him to come in and speak. Vanessa Ghazi, talk to us about what Nick and Corey has forestated.
Yeah, I'm inclined to believe that Bernie would be the best candidate for that because he's been the only candidate for that. And he's been doing it, like you said, for many, many years. So he's been speaking against social injustice for a long time. And these other ones, they haven't. I mean, the Republicans haven't even touched on the period. But, Hillary is just getting caught up in things that she's been saying over the years. And a lot of times stuff comes back to bite you in the behind. And instead of her addressing it, she kind of like wants to blow it off.
Right.
But, he'll come out and just put it in their face. And sometimes when he puts it in their face, they don't have an answer.
Right.
They don't know what to say.
And Vanessa, the reason why I support Bernie, it has absolutely nothing to do with a socialist. I don't care anything about a socialist, whatever you want to call it. I stand with him because he does the same thing that I've tried to do, or I do the same thing that he's doing. I take a position and I defend it. I'm not afraid, even if I'm the only person that's out there. Right is right, wrong is wrong. Right applies to anybody, regardless as to who it is or how much money I have. So I stand with him on this principle. I also know that everything that he's saying that he would like to get done, I'm not foolish enough to think that all of it would get done. But just having the courage enough to talk about it and bring it to the forefront on his own free will and accord, that alone drives me toward a person. Mr. Aaron Hopkins, come on in.
Thank you, Baron. Good evening, everybody. When Nikki was stating or repeating the quote about what we should expect from a system that created the issues and the problems that we're talking about, at some point we have to, and it's not taking anything away from any candidate, and it's not adding anything to any candidate who, whether or not they intend on addressing or know for a fact that in their span under a whatever party they represent in 8 years, 4 years, or even if there was a 12-year term that they could serve, the problems that we're talking about could not be fixed, given the time frame that an individual president would have to address and apply a fix for what we're discussing. So at some point, we have to address the reality that these problems are going to have to be fixed by the people who are facing the problem. So a roadmap is pretty much what we need in terms of where do you start, because the problems are so vast. And when we're talking about poverty, man, the effects of poverty on the level that we're talking about, we're talking about literally we're talking about centuries of a condition.
Right.
It's not going to be corrected overnight. So the need to, one, address these issues for what they are, as Nikki and of course Barry, yourself, and Corey have illustrated. See, these things, if we're not careful, we always tend to fall into the emotional side of it, but we fail to apply a mathematic way of a fix. So the fix oftentimes are things that they're not popular, and so it's hard to get people who are running for a popular candidacy a lot of times to really address them unless they're forced to. So what we see with Mr. Sanders, in contrast to what we see with, Secretary Clinton, you don't have to force Bernie to address things that he's already been addressing.
Correct.
On the other hand, you have to get somebody to even give the time in terms of Senator Clinton, or even these things aren't really even being talked about on the other side, so it's not even worth spending time with that. But for Ms. Clinton to have to be almost, I don't want to say attacked, but you have to literally catch her off guard to even get her to address some of the things that you all are talking about. Which is unfortunate, but it's a fact.
Right. What I'm going to do right now, Aaron, Nikki, Corey, and Vanessa, we got some callers out there. I'm going to open up the line and see if there's any call out there who has a comment or a question or want to say yay or nay or whatever the case may be. You may do so at this time. Any callers? Judging by the action and ways, we're going to continue the conversation. If there's any call out there at any point in time, you may butt in or judge in or whatever the case may be, because the lines are now open. Nikki, we know that like Aaron said, and I agree 100%, Hodge, good comeback, and you always come in at the right time and have your comment. You blend in with the conversation. And I'm glad that we have logical people that are trying to address issues that most people are afraid of. Now, it's one thing to always talk about something, but let's try, not us, but we're going to try to, and we've already done this, try to provide some solutions. So, Nikki, give me one solution that you feel could be at least obtained within, let's say, I'm not going to even say within the next 5 years. Let's look at within the next 24 months.
I think there should be some plan to, if I can take 2 minutes, Brian, there was in the 80s in New York City, it was called a social architect. He was given a government grant, for a study. He took the money, took about $2 million, and he went into one of the worst projects in New York City. Crime, infested, drugs, etc. It was a black, low-rise structure. He took the money. He first kind of painted the out. He took the money to really clean up the structures. Put light bulbs in the stairways. Get the graffiti off the walls, and cleaned up the structures. And he coined in front of the projects, somebody could walk by your living room window, and look in your house. So he gave people a little bit of space in front of their windows, and he called it defensible space. Within very short order, the residents of that community started to police their own community a little bit, started to really get outraged at some of the things, started to take a little pride in their community. So my thinking is going to be solved from the top. It's not going to be solved from the top down. And so community action. I read the other day. There's an expectation. These kids should come out of high school and go into college. College is too expensive. 2-year programs, 2-year vocational certificates for these guys. We need plumbers. We need electricians. The aspiration should be to get a PhD and maybe a 2. So this grassroots community levels. Well, first let's make places, habitable so people can live in them. An influx and an influx of money to take these communities from looking like bombed down Europe after the war. How can you? There's a poverty of spirit that needs to be addressed. And it's at this low-level community action. It's about rebuilding those structures. I don't know what we're going to do for jobs. I really don't. But some kind of funding for small businesses to open in these communities.
Vanessa, Nikki has suggested
by itself.
Yeah, in her way, jobs. Give us something that you feel could be obtainable within the next 2 years, 24 months, that could help out with regards to the poverty and the toll that it has on the human race with regards to the poor. Vanessa.
That's kind of a difficult. Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead.
That's kind of a difficult question because I'm seeing more and more people coming together, and I think that if we have more people of different nationalities actually come together and redo a neighborhood or clean up a park or clean up the grass of some of these areas, that gets to people's eyes a lot of times. And if they see people getting along and talking to each other, because I saw it a few minutes ago when I was at work, and it did my heart good to see it. You know, I dropped off my last load, and this company, there were Hispanics, whites, blacks, they were all in there hugging each other, you know, shaking hands, laughing, talking. And I just felt good to be in the places. I even told them that they were having too much fun. I need to put in an application. And a lot of times if we start like a community thing right in your own community, inviting everybody to come, you know, and be a part of a cleanup crew, or just like when people adopt a certain part of the highway and all that kind of stuff, adopt your own neighborhood. If you're living in a neighborhood that's depressed or whatever, get to know your neighbors. You know, get to go out and shake people's hands and say hi. You know, almost act like a politician.
Right.
But just, you know, put a smile on your face.
Right.
It has to start with us. It's not going to start with upstairs. It's not going to start with them, not with the politicians. It has to start with us. Mm-hmm. We have to be the ones to say enough is enough.
Right. Okay. I know Aaron just dropped. Mr. Corey Jackson, can you provide some type of roadmap that you feel would be obtainable within the next 24 months? Not that it specifically has to be etched in stone. However, regardless as to who the new president is, we may be able to provide some type of legislation. And when I say legislation, I'm talking about information, grants and goals and objectives, a plan of action to our state and local officials that they can actually pick up and start running with. And as a result of that, we be the procuring cause to get the ball set in motion. Corey Jackson.
Equal access and distribution of resources. And those resources, like we talked about, could be jobs. Those resources, as we talked about, could be jobs training. Those resources that we talked about could be just simple as parenting, you know, parenting classes for young parents. Mm-hmm. You know, before you can address the big issues, you have to address the smaller issues, because the smaller issues are what the snowball effect happens and causes the big issue. So, you know, you can't come in with a wrecking ball. You have to start out and address the smaller issues. I'll give you an example. Just last month here in Washington, D.C., we had the major snowstorms. During those days multiple days that schools were closed, the schools opened at lunchtime, just so the neighborhood kids could come in and get something to eat. Mm-hmm. Because they knew that those kids probably only get their most nutritious and square meals at school. So you have to meet the most basic of needs in order to build upon and address the larger needs.
Mr. Aaron Hopkins, I know you dropped, but you're back now. We're trying to provide some type of little roadmap or whatever you want to call it, because oftentimes people always say, well, people are complaining, they're finger pointing, but nobody is offering solution. I'm very conscious of everything that I do, so I want to make sure that if there's anybody who may go back and listen to the archive, they won't have the opportunity to say, well, they did a lot of talking, but they didn't provide anything. So, Aaron, tell us something that you'd like to see, even if it's not etched in stone, or what is it that we think we could initiate within the next 24 months that could contribute to the decrease in poverty, or start the conversation, and not just start the conversation, but keep it as a continued conversation even for the next 4 years of whoever becomes the President of the United States?
Well, you know, Barry, I like the point that Corey just made, and I always use this method personally, and it is to start with my own bad habits or my own contributions to things that we may not believe actually contribute to the mindset of a person that's poor or poverty-stricken person. Now, the reason I mention that is because one of the things we don't do very well in our community is we don't recycle our dollars. Our dollars mark right out of our community and don't come back within a 7-day span. So what that means is, for instance, I've taught my son, he works a part-time job, but what I tell him is, pay yourself first. And the reason you have to tell somebody that, because it doesn't sound realistic. You think of all the stuff you want to buy, you think of whatever little bills you have, but how can you actually get out of a mindset of being poor and you don't know that everything you do contributes to you being poor? So Corey mentioned, he says you start small. So one of the things that I started doing, and I can't tell my son to do it if I'm not practicing. So anytime what we call income is attained, 10% of that, whatever it is, if it's $1, then it means a dime goes into some sort of a savings. And believe it or not, in a short amount of time, you actually have accumulated something. So we have to attack the whole mindset of what poverty is and the things that we do daily, that even though we think we have quote-unquote good jobs or that we have incomes that can keep us away from the quote-unquote check to check or you know, a day from being out of doors, because the reality of that is, you know, more of us than we realize, those of us that have student loans or any type of debt is the newest form of slavery. So we have to look at what we do in terms of what we have. We don't consider it wealth, but we have more wealth than we realize if we readjust our thinking on how we use money.
Well, I'll tell you, Aaron, Corey, Nick, and Vanessa, we covered a lot of tracks. We talked about a lot of different things, and we provided somewhat of a roadmap. And nobody should expect that because of the topic tonight, because we decided to talk about poverty and the ravages of poverty and the human toll that it has, we wasn't trying to come in and provide an overnight solution. However, what we are trying to provide is courageous individuals to talk about something that is complex and has always easily been taken out of proportion. Now, once again, you won't find Hannity, you won't find MSNBC, you won't find any of these other people out there talking and not worried about ratings. Okay, we're not worried about ratings. We're not even worried about the numbers. We're worried about being able to try to make a difference in the society in which we live in. Now, we got about 6 minutes left. Nikki, Aaron, Corey, and Vanessa, any caller that's out there, you got any more input that you'd like to add before we end the segment, you may do so, because we're playing with about 5 minutes left. Now,
I'd like to real quickly, Corey, your suggestions on the beginning with the very, very small things, and then Aaron, you know, we first have to take female on. Now you have to look at what you're doing before you can teach it. I think is tremendous. I just want to comment on the incredible community action that has gone on with Color of Change, Black Lives Matter, and how this coming together, young black youth, is making a difference. They got Alvarez out in Chicago. The Justice Department brought lawsuit against Baltimore for its bigoted police practices. You know, these people are working at these grassroots level with not a lot of money. They got Alvarez out with $1,000. I think community action at the very base place is where this is going to begin. The oppressor will never give you freedom. You got to take it. I'm done.
Nikki, you are exactly right. We just got a message that said we need to reach out to some of these groups, and yes, we do. We are willing to do that. Again, you see diversity from all different angles. You see diversity in color, you see diversity in gender, and you see diversity in economic status. So when you look at the Smoking Glass Hour and what we're trying to do, we're trying to make sure that we live up to the commitment and our own expectation and allow other people who have expectations to come on this particular program and this particular broadcast and get their message out so they can be heard. You've been listening to the Smoking Glass Hour with Baron Glass on WMAD, 24-hour global radio, joined tonight by Mr. Aaron Hopkins out of Dallas, Texas, Mr. Corey Jackson out of Baltimore, Maryland, Miss Vanessa Ghazi out of Houston, Texas, and Miss Nikki Bedrick out of Las Vegas, Nevada. You don't get any better than this. Thanks for listening. Have a good night, Aaron. Have a good night, Corey. Have a good night, Nick, and have a good night, Vanessa.
Good night, Baron. Good night, all.
Good night.